At the end of One Piece chapter 1132, we get a glimpse at what could be the Straw Hats' first obstacle in coming to the Elbaf Island. You'd imagine that an island inhabited by the Giants, who are the Straw Hats' allies, and is overseen by Shanks, who is also Luffy's ally, would be an island that's sort of friendly towards our protagonist and there wouldn't be too much conflict. However, like I've said in videos previously, we are too close to the end of the story to have an arc that is just happy-go-lucky, with no furthering of the villains in the story or any conflict for the main party of characters. And of course, as if to hammer in that point for us, Oda leaves us with one eye-catching line at the end of this chapter. If I could only write one thing about this enticing nation, it would be this: do not linger there for too long. With the inclusion of this mystery figure, who we have maybe seen already, beckoning the Straw Hats to come to his land. Now that we know that Elbaf is going to have some form of big bad, this video is going to be all about discussing the identity of this person, what they could potentially be after in terms of the story and in terms of the Straw Hats, and how big of a role they might have in the arc moving forward. Now, first and foremost, when you think of potential villains for Elbaf, already it comes to mind that Loki is in that prime position to be that guy. And I'm not doubting Loki will be an antagonist or some kind of villain for this arc. However, I think it's kind of against Oda's usual patterns to introduce the villains so early into the arc, especially an anticipated arc like Elbaf. So, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the mysterious figure being mentioned at the end of this chapter is actually our primary villain, at least for the first half of Elbaf, and not Loki. However, I do think Loki will play a huge role in the arc regardless. Alrighty, with that out of the way, let's get on to looking at some of the clues as to who this person is and where we have seen them before. At the end of chapter 1124, after the Straw Hats leave Egghead Island with the Giants and it is confirmed we are moving to Elbaf, we see this mysterious silhouette saying, "Come on then," and they are in the New World Warland Elbaf. Now, my immediate response when this chapter dropped was that this is Shanks, because I thought the cloak around his neck looked like Shanks' cloak, and I thought it would be obvious that Shanks and Luffy's reunion was coming into the story, considering Elbaf is Shanks' territory, and Luffy has now reached the great pirate status after his stunts at Egghead. However, after this most recent chapter showing us that there's something off with Elbaf, I think this is not the case, and this person is actually a new character who is going to serve as Elbaf's villain, like I mentioned previously. That being said, however, I do not think this mysterious figure basking in the sun here is this silhouette. I actually think the small character in the bottom right of this screen is this person. A lot of people didn't even notice this because the background is so grand that you don't even notice there's two characters in this picture, but one seems to be either a statue or someone meditating, someone that looks kind of like Pedro from Zoe. I do not know if this is a character or a statue or a shrine or something, but what I do know is that there is a person in the bottom left of this panel that is being silhouetted on purpose by Oda. And I also think this weird hat-like structure with this weird coat on him in this silhouette matches that of the silhouette we saw in chapter 1124, so I'm going to go ahead and say that these two are the same people. But there is a huge missing piece to what I'm saying already, so let's cover that next. Why would there be a villain on Elbaf in the first place if the Giants are the Straw Hats' allies? Well, in this very chapter, I think we got the answer to that question, and it comes with the geography of the island. Bragi clues us in that there are 3 layers to Elbaf: the dead, the sun, and the heaven. We've already seen the dead because that is where Loki is chained up at the bottom of the tree, where Luffy has his little talk with him. And we now know that the sun is where the majority of the villages are on Elbaf, and that is where Dory and Bragi are from. The stark contrast between the Deadland and the Sunland leads me to believe that all of Elbaf might not be entirely united, and there could potentially be factions that are not allied with Dory and Bragi, but I actually think there's another explanation that lends itself to why there's going to be a villain this arc that makes a little bit more sense, and that is the inclusion of the Heaven layer of Elbaf. Now, at first this might seem like a stretch, but I promise you there's a connection here. Think throughout One Piece how many mentions of heaven or high up land or godlike figures there are, and how they are always evil. The celestial dragons on top of the Grand Line are some of the most vile people on the planet. The further you go up in the ranks of the Navy and the world government, the more corrupt the personnel gets. And just in general, there are so many themes in One Piece about heavenly and godly figures being just terrible people who reign upon the citizens below them with absolute malevolence. I mean, look at Enel and Skypiea, who literally tried to be the ruler of the moon, whilst pushing down an entire race of Skypiea citizens. I do not think it is a stretch to say that Oda would include this heaven layer in Elbaf to have a race or a faction of people on this island for the epitome of exactly that. evil giants or some kind of evil faction. Not only does this take care of including a villain for the Elbaf arc, it also kind of goes with the fact that the middle layer is called the Sun Layer as well. We obviously know since Egghead Island and Wano that Luffy is the sun god, Nika was the sun god, and Luffy is possessing the Nika fruit, but there are so many mentions of the sun in Elbaf's lore already this arc, and we know that the sun god is supposed to oppose those heavenly creatures and liberate the entire world. It is not a stretch to say that the sun layer of Elbaf is kind of beefing with the heaven layer of Elbaf, just like the sun god is beefing with the heavenly creatures up at Merijoa throughout all of history. And then, of course, last arc we got the bombshell that the water levels in the world are rising, which adds an entire new layer of depth to this whole heaven archetype in One Piece. Literally, the higher up you go, the safer you are, because throughout history, the water levels are rising and killing off the lower class citizens. These strong and corrupt individuals that know this, like the Celestial Dragons, or more accurately, Emu, take shelter on the highest point in the world so that they never have to worry about something like this. Even on Elbaf itself, it kind of makes sense, because Elbaf, the land of war, obviously is very dated, it is very old, giants are an extremely old race, so it would not surprise me if there was fighting over high ground in the ancient times when the water levels were rising originally on this island, and the people on the heaven layer of the tree are part of that evil faction that took control to save themselves from this catastrophe. Okay, so as a little recap, before we circle back to the identity of this mysterious man, we are currently operating on the basis that the top layer of Elbaf contains the potential villains of the arc because they have fought for the high ground when the water levels were rising, they have obtained that and become corrupted because they view people on the lower levels as lesser beings, similar to how Celestial Dragons view the rest of the world as lesser beings, and just quite simply that people in One Piece who are attributed with the word heaven or godly are usually corrupt figures who are false gods. So again, operating under that basis, using all that knowledge, can we figure out who this shadowy figure is and what this thing basking in the sun is? Well, we actually have a lot of information on top of what we just talked about. These things are that this person knows who the Straw Hats are, this person knows that the Straw Hats are coming to Elbaf, this person potentially knows that the water levels are rising before Vegapunk made his announcement, this person has to serve as a villain of the arc, and of course, they have to elicit the line that we got at the end of this chapter, which was, "Do not linger there for too long." Now, this last line could mean literally anything. All it means to me is that this person has been on Elbaf for a decently long time for their presence to be made known in this sort of quote that we get here. But with the amalgamation of information I just explained to you, I'm going to make a leap and say that this person is a member of the world government. More specifically, I think they are probably a member of the God's Knights. Just going off through our checklist here, the God's Knights members would obviously fit into a land on Elbaf called Heaven. They are Celestial Dragons after all. They would easily serve as a villain of the arc because they are God's Knights who are part of the world government. It would elicit the line to not linger there for too long because the God Knights are definitely very powerful and probably don't want anyone discovering their presence, so would likely kill people who stayed for too long. And of course they would know who the Straw Hats are because Luffy is an emperor. He literally just fought the God Knights superiors who are the Celestial Dragon leaders, the Gorosei. The specific identity of this character is going to be someone new. I'm not going to label this as someone we've met in the story before and have it be a grand reveal for this video, because I think all of the God Knights are going to be new characters, specifically this character in Elbaf, but I am fairly confident that they are a God's Knights member, or at least a member of the world government in some capacity. As for what this means for Elbaf, well, I think it means a few things. Like I said in the beginning of the video, Elbaf is too close to the end of the story for this to be a happy-go-lucky arc where the Straw Hats reunite with their allies and nothing really happens. We need to push the story further to its later stages, and to do that, we need to introduce more villains that the Straw Hats will have to face in the later stages of the final war. Some of the only villains that have not been introduced or explored yet are these God Knights, so this would be a perfect opportunity to do that for Oda in Elbaf. That being said, I think there are more villains that deserve a little bit more of the spotlight as we transition into the final saga, such as Blackbeard. So, if I had to guess, I think that this mysterious God Knight, as well as Loki, are going to serve as a sort of introductory or middling villain in this arc, almost how Orochi or Queen were in Wano, how they were the big bad in the first two acts before we got to Onigashima and Kaido. And then I think as we get to the end of Elbaf, we'll start to see a grander transition towards the final war with the events happening on the island, with someone like Blackbeard or Crossguild showing up, giving us that connection to the greater final war that's going to happen after this arc. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with my speculation. While you're down there, make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this as I discuss the final saga of One Piece as these chapters come out weekly. Let me know if you agree with the identity of this silhouetted man. Let me know if you think he's just going to be a random Elbaf citizen and I'm just yapping about absolutely nothing right now and the real final villain is going to be Loki. But regardless, make sure you come back for next week for next chapter's review, as we hopefully get the identity of this mysterious man and who the real villain of Elbaf is going to be for the first half of the arc. Peace out.